Good morning or afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Module 5, I believe. Um, Module 6 walkthrough for today. So what you guys have been going through in this module has a lot to do with vector analysis and geoprocessing that only deals with vector data. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through a series of geoprocessing tools that you can use on vector data to answer different types of questions. So what we have here on the screen is a set of different types of layers that I got from another study that I worked on. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to focus on Idaho, which is why these counties are in here. But we're also going to answer a few questions using overlay operations, and those will include things like number of chemical industries within so many miles of the Canadian border, which is right here, this blue line. Then another one we're going to look at too is hazardous material routes that run through different parts of the state. And then we're also going to look at the proximity of different schools, or in this case specifically universities and colleges, to different types of industries like the chemical industry or the hazardous materials routes industry. So all of these things, though, while very simplistic in terms of answering them, give you an idea of the types of operations that you can do that actually help you provide answers to these types of questions. So one of the first operations that you guys should have learned about in the slides is the clip operation. And basically what the clip operation does is it clips or cookie cuts data into a very specific area. And that area is based on the shape of your cookie cutter. So in this case, since we only want to work with Idaho, the first thing we're going to do is actually clip all of these data sets to just Idaho. And so to find the clip function, you go into Arc Toolbox, and then you go to Analysis Tools. And that's actually where we're going to spend all of today, is in the Analysis Tools toolbox. And the first thing we want to do is say extract. Now anything to do with extraction like clip or even selection or split, those are all specifically so that you can extract information from a larger data set. And that's exactly what clip does. So since we have about 4 layers that we want to clip to the base counties, this is a secret no one ever tells people in ARC. If you click on a tool, it will let you run the tool for one process. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So the input feature is college and universities in this case, so we want to clip college and universities, and we want to clip them based on Idaho counties. So then we're going to save this somewhere. I'm actually going to save this with the rest of you guys' data. So this is going to be Idaho colleges and unis, or universities. So we're going to say save. And when you do a clip, so you have your input feature, and your input feature is whatever you are clipping. Your clip feature is what you want the clip to be based on. So a better way to think of it is your input feature is the dough, and your clip feature is the cookie cutter. The output feature class is the output of making that. So if you were to make a cookie, the resulting cookie is essentially your output feature class. So we're going to go ahead and say OK. And if you ever want to check how your processes are going, go to Results and go to Current Session, and this will tell you if the process you are running is done. So if it's got a hammer, it's done. If it shows up with a red circle and a white X, that means there was a problem. But this will actually tell you how long things took to run this, and this took 2.49 seconds to run this tool. So this is a pretty useful window to have open if you're running stuff and you're not sure how long things are taking. So now, as you can see, we have a new field here, or a new layer here called ID Colleges Uni. And if you look really closely, there's now these little green dots. Those are all of the colleges and universities that are within the Idaho counties. So now we can actually turn off the other college and universities and actually make these the new ones. So now we have colleges and universities again. If you ever need to clip several things at a time, you can right-click on the tool and go to Batch. The way Batch works is it basically lets you batch a set of processes that you run all at once. So if you double-click on that little number box, it opens up your same tool window that you had when you just did one, but as you can see here it says clip 1. That means the first process you are going to run is the first clip process. So in this case we're going to go to chemical industries, and we're still going to use our base counties for Idaho, but we are also going to call this, if I can spell right, chemical industries. And that's what that's going to be saved as. Now the nice thing about batching is, say that you want this all to save in the same place and you're literally just changing the name. What you can do is, if you highlight the box and click this little add row, it adds an identical row for that process. However, in order to change that, all you do is double click the input features, and we want the hazardous materials routes, and then all you do here is change this to the new output. So we also need to do the Canadian border. So this is the ID Can US border. So now you actually have 3 different clip processes that you are asking the computer to run, essentially one right after the other. So now we're going to say OK, and we're going to go to results. And see how there's a little timer there? That means it's in the process of working. And here it actually tells you this is the first process it's doing. This is the second process it's doing. This is where you need to be very careful. If you are getting warnings about something not working, typically that means that either nothing's wrong or you might need to check what happened. So in this case, what we're going to do is turn off all of the other large ones we have, and we're going to make sure that these new ones have the right symbology that we had originally. So this one is fine, and that's the one we got the error on. So we're going to turn that one off. And then I'm actually going to switch this to a green, just so it's easier to see. And then we need to make sure that our chemical industries are not something that's confusing with the schools. So we're going to go back here and find the X again. And we're going to make it a little smaller because we actually don't need an X to be that big. And we are going to go ahead and make those orange. Okay, and I'm going to make that darker. So now what we have is all of our data that we want to look at is now clipped just to the state of Idaho. So that's the clip function. Now we're going to move on to the identity function. Now the identity function is fun, and it is actually in the overlay toolbox. And the reason the identity function is fun is because it basically tells you where things are in relationship to another feature. So, for example, what we want to know is what county each of these ID chemical industries is in. Because you can see that they all fall within different parts of the state, but you may not necessarily know that. Also, if you were to open the attribute table, while there is a business name and address, sometimes those addresses are not necessarily coinciding with somewhere where they are. They actually coincide with where the owner lives. So sometimes you get places, even though these don't count, sometimes you get places that aren't actually in Idaho, and when you try and geocode something like that, you're getting the wrong information. So what we're going to do is actually do an identity. So this is the last column that you guys have for the chemical industries. When you do an identity, you're trying to give something additional information. In this case, what we're doing is trying to identify what county each chemical industry is in. So our input feature is the chemical industry, and our identity feature is the base county. And that's what we want to know. So we are doing this, and we're doing a county identity. So we're going to say save. You want to join everything, keep as much data as possible, and then work through getting things cleaned up after the fact. So we're just going to go ahead and say join all. We're going to say OK. And as you can see down here, the identity function is working, and you should get a little pop-up that says a check mark next to the tool, and that means that it's done. So now, these are the new chemical identities, and as you can see, this is what we started with, and that's how that ended. But now if you come to the identity and you go to the end, you all of a sudden have a whole other set of information. For example, this is actually, this specific feature right here is located in Franklin County. If we come back over here, that should also be Franklin County. Now there are some times where that is not how this goes. But in this case, they actually did a pretty decent job of getting things right. But an identity tool can actually help make sure that where they are located on your map also matches where they're located on the mailing address. Another way to check that is to actually go to select by attributes. And so the main one that you have is county, which is what the address you were given is. And let's say that you want that to equal the new county that you just did. As you can see, there are some missing selections. That means that there are features in this layer that's been combined that aren't necessarily in the same place. So all the ones that are highlighted right now have the same county that they were identified to, but all the ones that are not, those apparently have some type of discrepancy. So what we're going to do here is, since we want to look at specifically the ones with a discrepancy, we're going to switch the selection. So now you can see that there are 19 places or chemical industries that have been identified to a different county than is listed on their address. So one of the ways we can look at this is to actually go to fields, and I really just want to look at 2 of them. So right now, the only ones I want to look at or compare are the county versus the county. Now this is where this can get a little interesting. As you can see here, these are the same county, but the reason that ArcMap doesn't understand that is because these are all in capital letters and these are in capital with lowercase letters. That is a function that you might have to check if you're doing some type of equate kind of thing. Now these ones here, those are definitely different, and that's because either the lat long they have for the county is incorrect, or because it's so close to the border, as you can see, there's probably a discrepancy in the mailing address. So that's definitely something you want to make sure that you notice, but for the most part, this is a really good way to figure out where things actually are according to what you are looking at on the map rather than just what's in the attribute table. And that's a really important function. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to all of these, and we're going to switch the selection again, because I want chemical industries that are in the place where they say they are. And we're going to save this as a new shapefile. So if you ever do a selection and you only want to keep selected items, right click on the field on the layer with selected features, go to data and go to export data. This will give you the option to export only the selected features of that layer into a new layer. So in this case, we're going to go back to where everything is saved, and this is going to be correct ID chem industry. So we're going to save that, and so there should be 396 features or attributes in this table, and there are, because those are how many were selected. So we're going to go ahead and turn this off, the one that we just got stuff out of, and we're going to turn the rest of those off. So now we have the correct things that we want for this next part. So the next part that we're going to do is actually an erase function. Now this is where this gets a little interesting. Say that you are not comfortable doing a selection. An easy way to get things out of data that you want, or say that you have too much data. So in this case, say that we don't want every single correct chemistry industry in the state, we just want them in certain counties. What you can do is use the erase function. And the way that that works is, first off, determine which counties you want there to be data in. So in our case, we're going to go ahead and do the ones closest to home. So we're going to do Kootenai, Benewah, Latah, and Nez Perce. Those are the ones that we care about. Now, the erase function actually removes data. So we don't want to remove data from these counties. We want to remove it from all the other ones. So that's where you would go to switch selection. So now all but those 4 counties are selected. We also want to make sure that, we're going to do this again. We want to make sure nothing else is selected first. So we're going to go back and switch selection. And then what we're going to do is make sure that nothing is selected in here. Okay, so now the only thing that is selected is the counties. What we want to do is erase all of the chemical industries that are within those other counties. So what you do is you go to Arc Toolbox and you go to the erase function. Now the way that erase works is you literally have an input, in this case the chemical industry facilities, then you have an erase feature. In this case, our erase feature is all of the other counties in Idaho. So what we would do is do the correct ID chem, and our erase feature is going to be base counties. Now, ARC automatically only uses selected features when you do any type of geoprocessing overlay in order to make sure that it's cropping correctly. This is something that is really important to remember, because if you were to erase everything without having selected these counties, you would have no data, because it would erase everything in that feature class or shapefile. We don't want that. We only want it to erase areas that are selected. Say that you want to erase things in a specific area and you forgot to change the selection. You would have to go back and redo it, because ARC doesn't understand the difference between when something is selected and when something isn't. So we're going to go ahead and do this using the erase function. Okay, so we're going to say okay, and we're going to watch and see how quickly it finishes. And so now, as you can see, if we go back to clear selected features, there are only new red dots in the 4 counties that we asked for them to be in. So because we selected out all those other ones, we have erased all of these other features and only made sure that we get the ones in the 4 counties that we care about. So that's the erase function. And finally, what we're going to go over is the buffer function. So the buffer is really interesting because the whole point of a buffer is to determine what is within a certain proximity to another feature. So in this case, and this is where the schools and stuff come in, I'm going to make this a little orange square again so that I can be able to distinguish between the colleges. So here are the schools, here are the chemical industries, and then these are hazmat routes. So these are routes that trucks carrying hazmat materials can actually use. What I want to know is within these 4 counties, so we're going to zoom in. Within these 4 counties, how many chemical industries are within 10 miles of a school? So the way that you do this is you do a buffer. So you right-click on the buffer tool in the proximity toolbox. And your input feature is what you are going to build the buffer around. In this case, we are going to go by colleges. And I'm actually going to do this for the whole state, but then we're going to focus strictly on the 4 counties that we were looking at. So automatically, this is going to be a college buffer, and this is going to be a buffer that is 5 miles. We'll do 5 instead of 10. Then comes the distance. So this is where the 5 miles comes in. So you want 5, but then you have to make sure that you change this to the correct distance measurement. If this were 5 meters, it's not going to go very far. So we're going to change this to miles. Everything else is something that's optional. So for example, if you have a lot of data, you can choose to do it by a field. So what is closest to a certain type of field? And then you can actually dissolve that. You will almost never use this in most analysis unless it is very specific, and you definitely will not be using it in this class. So this is typically something that you don't have to worry about. So now that we have this all set up, we're going to say OK. And as you can see, so we're going to zoom in, you have these 2 schools, and then you have these big circles around it. What those signify is a 5-mile radius from said school. How this is helpful is what you can do is go to selection and say select by location. And in this case, we're going to do this for the whole state. We want to select, actually, let's just do this. We can do this for the whole state and the 4 counties. So first off, you want to know where the chemical industries are. So this is the correct one. And then we also want to know about how many chemical industries are closest to schools in the 4 counties we did. So we're going to use the erase function. And the source layer is where you're basing that location on. In this case, our source layer is this buffer layer. So you want to use the 5-mile buffer. And we want anything that intersects with that buffer. So we're going to go ahead and say apply. As you can see, all of the X's that are within this circle are now selected. So we're going to zoom out again. This is where this gets a little interesting. Because I did not actually turn on the correct ID chemicals, they're technically not selected. So right now, the only selected areas are within the 4 county place that we were looking at. So if we go up here and open the attribute table for the selected chemical industries, you can see that 17 out of 42 chemical industries in that 4 county area are within 5 miles of a school. So if you're trying to map out routes that go away from schools to a certain distance, this is kind of how you would do that. Now we're going to turn on the correct one, And as you can see, suddenly there's a whole lot more selected. It's because the layer is now turned on. If we open the attribute for that one, 248 out of 396 chemical industries within the state are within at least 5 miles of a school. So if you have any type of policy where you cannot drive so close to a school, that's kind of problematic, especially if the only hazmat routes you have, so let's zoom back in here, are within 5 miles of a school. So this essentially is the type of information you would use to help you try and develop best practices for where hazmat routes should go, or where you can't reroute things and where there might be a higher risk of things occurring. Because obviously this is US 95. This school is right next to US 95, but there's not a whole lot they can do to change that other than moving the school, which could be incredibly expensive. So, because there are 2 schools in close proximity to the hazmat route and several chemical facilities, that area could be an area where you want to take higher precautions in terms of different types of protocols for hazmat transportation. So that is your overview for geoprocessing in vector format. Basically, you can use a suite of tools to answer several different questions. And that's really important, and that's one of the best advantages of using ArcGIS. You're not limited to trying to figure out where things are by having to go individually through each one using Google Map and saying this is 5 miles from this hazmat route. Okay, next out of 396 industries. This gives you a much more efficient way to actually do these types of processing protocols. So you guys should be working on chapter 10, and that lab will actually go through several, if not all, of these types of functions. So hopefully this is a good introduction for you in that respect. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great day.